Hi, and last Friday, Watcher, the new director of World of Warcraft, Ian Hazakostas, gave a live Q&A. Not a particularly momentous thing. They've been doing really well in doing these things, talking at conventions, which they usually do, but also doing their own in-house live streams every now and then. And I've done a series of short videos on my response to what they were discussing. And this is the fourth and final one of them, which is going to cover artifact weapons, as well as the little bits and pieces that don't really go anywhere else. So, as I've got it in the title, I will tackle artifact weapons first, just in case people are not as interested in the other things I'm going to be discussing. So, just basically going down the list of things they said with sort of my responses onto it. One of the things they have said is you are not going to be able to transfer artifact power from one weapon to another. This is a little bit mean, I feel. I suppose it depends on exactly what it means. Like, let's say you've spent a load of points on one weapon and then you want to transfer it to another. I can sort of understand them not allowing that. Even though I was very much in favour of just having artifact power assigned to the character and then you spend it on all of your weapons if necessary. Because I think it's a little bit mean and a little bit unfair on some classes. Particularly pure DPS classes that have like 3 specs for the one role. Because you get yourself into a situation which is existing where one spec's really strong and you're playing that, and then maybe another one is better suited to particular fights and you didn't really think about that, or it wasn't obvious beforehand. It's very hard to make the switch now if you went gung-ho into one. Now, it is true that you can keep up with 2 without falling significantly behind, but it doesn't mean to say people did that. Doesn't mean people did that at all. And in fact, I think the way the system's set up, if you're not the sort of person that looks at it very far in advance and discusses with theory crafters and things like that, I think the overall system for artifact power encourages you to load it all up on one. But anyway, what I definitely think you should be able to do is any artifact power that's attributed to a weapon but not spent should be transferable. And the reason I say this is, in my particular case, and you could say, yes, this is my fault, I'm an idiot, yes I am, the number of times as a Retribution Paladin, DPS Paladin, that I have been in tank spec to do some content, make it a bit easier, and then accidentally spent my artifact power and lumped it onto my Truth Guard, my protection weapon, which I don't want to do. I mean, admittedly, it's so much further behind that it's not a massive amount and you soon notice. But sometimes you don't notice straight away, because the only notice you get is when suddenly you've put so much onto it, it goes, oh, there's a new trait on your Truth Guard, at which point I go, oh no. But, yeah, I wish you could transfer it on that. Or that you did what was the case in early alpha. In early alpha, when I first got in, like last January, or January of this year, but earlier this year, what you had to do was spend the artifact power in your order hall at the altar. Then they changed it, I suppose for convenience, in case I suppose someone is questing and gathering up loads of the little shitty artifact bits from the treasure chest and they might fill their bags up. Maybe they just thought it was a quality of life thing. But frankly, the fact that you'd have to go to your order hall, for me, would mean there's a bit of a... You're sort of thinking about it a bit more, and you probably make sure you've got the right weapon on. But anyway, that's just me. Maybe I'm the only idiot that puts it on the wrong one. But yes, they have said that there's no plans to move artifact power from one weapon to another. I don't think... Saying there's no plans sometimes implies maybe they'll think about it later. I really don't see the point in doing that. But anyway... Artifact knowledge, they have said that they keep plugging this as the idea to help you progress with the other weapons, to as a catch-up mechanic, and it sort of is that. I still think, though, that it's only a catch-up mechanic for people who play the game from an early level. Like, people who will join the game late, maybe they'll start playing after the first tier, maybe it'll be from tier 20. They're going to be quite far behind. And yes, all right, their artifact power knowledge will build up fairly rapidly, I suppose. Maybe every day they'll get a new one. But then they have to then go and farm the order resources to make sure they can afford the 500 a time to do that. Maybe they'll reduce the cost. but it's still not. It is still a problem. You're not realistically going to have, as I say, I feel sorry for pure DPS players, because I can load it all onto one weapon. No one's really asking me to try and learn how to heal. I haven't done that for many years. And only a fool would ask me to tank. So, some have. Not usually, ever again. But, yeah, so I can load it up on one weapon. Pure DPS, a bit of a problem. It might not be a problem later on, but it is now. But anyway, they are sort of sticking. I mean, it's laid out. They're not going to make changes to it now. And it's not a bad system. It's just I thought it could do with the odd tweak. They're quite happy with the way the progression is working on it. They did say they didn't want a hard cap on artifact knowledge to restrict people. They don't mind the fact that people who are putting that a little bit extra can get a bit ahead, and those who can't won't. I can't really comment on that. I actually don't know. I mean, there's hypothetical situations in which it can be bad for that to happen, because you could create a situation, maybe some people in the guild who can no-life it, and they get, especially the major traits much more quickly, and that makes them then more powerful in the raid, so then they're more likely to get the spots, and then, you know, and it all snowballs from there. I don't know whether that's been happening. I've not experienced that. But that's because in the guilds I'd be in, there isn't necessarily a huge amount of difference between those who can play it a lot and those who have to fit it around other things. So, you know, hypothetically, I can see a problem with it. They don't think it's a problem. I've certainly not heard tales of woe about it. So we'll give them the nod on that one, I guess. It says research rates. We've already talked about this one for Altsor. Players catching up are a little bit shorter to help them get caught up. But does it really help? It helps, obviously. Of course it helps. Is it really enough? But of course they can change things. I mean, after the next tier, I suppose they can change things. We'll see what happens in like patch 8.2, 3, whatever it happens to be, 8.2, I suppose. I mean, they have noted that after a few months, they might have to do something extra drastic with the catch-up. The catch-up is more of a problem with legendaries, quite frankly. Because with legendary items, you're going to get into a situation where after a few months, there are some people, unfortunately, who have no legendaries even now. They've got the facility to wear 2 legendaries and still don't have one. I don't actually know where the majority are. I'd be interested in knowing what percentage of people have legendaries now that are at level cap. I now have 2 on my main, and they're not bad ones either. I've been quite lucky. Not as lucky as people who've got the very best one, but still lucky. I'm not complaining. There are some people who have none. And what's going to happen inevitably is in 3-4 months, there'll be some people, and they're going to bring more in, they've said. And even though they've said you're going to be able to target them a bit more, you're still going to have a situation where people who've been playing the game for half a year are going to have multiple legendaries, realistically. You'd be very unlucky, although it is possible. That's the whole problem with this system. It is possible, I suppose. You can have some people, but you will have a lot of people with lots of them. Someone then starting the game at that point has none. Where's the catch-up there? There isn't one, is there? But anyway, you know, it's not an issue for the artifacts, which is what I'm really supposed to be talking about here. Hidden artifact appearances. I think these have been quite successful. I'm not into it myself, but I really like the idea of people going around and trying to find things. Yes, we know there's only so many people that actually genuinely find them, and then the rest read about it on a forum and go and do the same thing. But it's not a case of going to spot X and digging, is it? You still have to put a lot of work in, and well, it depends on the artifact's appearance itself. I got one for my protection spec quite by accident by doing the withered army training. Didn't even know it was a thing. I'm not actually that bothered about my hidden artifact appearances, I have to say. The one I want for my paladin, I will naturally get by just completing it. By getting all the traits, I will suddenly then get access to it. So that's a time-based thing. That will just come at some point. I'm not that bothered about the hidden ones. I will probably at some point be asked to go and do them, but not that asked. But I do like the idea that there's content that will get people, especially going back to old worldly type stuff, but that it's cosmetics. You don't need it. And I wish they would do more of that sort of thing. But maybe they will, I mean, because they're quite positive about that. If they've said it here, it was fun to watch the community find hidden things Hopefully will be more in the future. And hopefully it will be tied to more than just hidden skins for the legendary, that it will be for other things. But again, of a cosmetic nature, you can do without it. You don't actually need it. The hidden boss in Nomragon, for example, is a cracking example. If you don't know much about that, look that up. I might try and see if I can find a group for that this weekend. There's an actual tough extra boss in Nomragon you can get that will give you a guaranteed toy. And but you need, it's not, you can't just go and solo it. You can solo the rest of the dungeon, but not this. This is a tough old boss. By all accounts, not done it yet myself, but by all accounts, it's a proper boss for which you need a proper group for it. And that's the sort of thing that I think is fantastic. So that's it on artifact weapons largely. Then there was a few other things on like professions and world quests. So in terms of professions, obviously crafting costs are a major issue. So what they've done is they're noticing that a lot of people have built up quite a few Bloods of Sargeras. They're only of limited use, especially if you don't really craft things. Most people don't craft things. They don't really craft things. The time to get any benefit from crafting is usually at the start of an expansion, sometimes with some things at the start of each tier. So people will be naturally storing them up. So of course it makes sense to bring in a vendor that will swap them for other things. We've had these in the game before for Primal Spirits, I think it was, in WoD, and like the Motes of Harmony in MOP, and we've had these things. So what they want to do is see how that plays out in patch 7.1 to see if they need to do anything else, because they're quite well aware that at the moment, especially raiders, it is hideously expensive to keep yourself in flasks and potions. Even if you know someone who has the rank 3 patterns for them and can therefore proc extra ones, getting the materials for a reasonable number of pots and flasks is ruinously expensive for a lot of people. And I don't think it's intended to be so. It hasn't been like that before. But of course, part of the problem is probably, first of all, that we've gone from a system where gatherers were pointless in WoD and all of a sudden are very, very good in Legion. And Blizzard are quite happy that gatherers now have their role back, which they do. In particular, herbalists. Let's be honest, herbalists in particular. Miners, if they can get Fell Slate, will also get a tidy little sum from that. Skinners, probably less so. But herbalists, definitely up there. The other side of it is the fact that in order to gather a reasonable amount, you need to go up the ranks yourself. So you have to do a load of herbing to be able to get the ranks, to get a decent number of herbs, get a decent return on your farming expeditions. So there's only so many people with the commitment to do that. And of course the fact that we're not going to see flying for a little while. They said about halfway through the expansion. Who knows? I mean, that might be next summer, for example. So it's, it's not that easy just to do a cycle and go around. You're doing it on land, where they've got the terrain, everything like that to negotiate. So yes, the supply and demand has been a bit skewed away from what it was in WoD, which is a huge shock to a lot of people, probably. They have said that even with the Blood of Sargeras vendor, it's still going to feel more expensive to craft things than it did in Warlords. Of course it will. We were swimming in materials in Warlords, so that's fine. What I would just like to see is it goes back to maybe earlier expansions. That would be preferable. Says there's been a large increase in supply of materials in the past few weeks as players realise how much demand there is. This will naturally happen in any sort of economy. People say, oh, you can get a lot of money from this. They might even change professions to get into it on themselves. And then the supply increases. The demand may increase as well, but I think the balance of supply and demand has sort of come together a little bit. Because obviously the demand could increase as more people get into raiding that maybe were slow to gear up and all the rest of it. It says there needs to be an adjustment in psychology in how to approach consumables. Okay. In Warlords, many guilds pre-potted on every pull during progress and farm, as well as always using flasks. Those assumptions should be re-examined. What they're basically saying is be lazy. It makes sense sometimes. Sometimes you go, okay, while you need to learn the mechanics of a fight, then maybe, yeah, all right. You can't really... Flasks is a funny thing, but certainly with pre-pots you can sort of say, well, let's not pre-pot. But then the problem is sometimes if the first part of a fight is actually DPS check, well, you are still going to have to do that, because otherwise you can't then learn. You know, mechanics later on in a fight won't be learned unless you can get past maybe an early DPS check. But that's not the case on every fight. And in fact, there is a fight like Il'gynoth, for example, on Mythic. I've killed it 3 times now. Don't use pre-pots on that, and that is because there is no point on that fight. It doesn't actually benefit you. In fact, you're more likely to have to stop DPSing. So there is no point in pre-potting, so that's a good one. But then something like Ursark, right from the start, surely you're going to want to pre-pot on that, because there's hardly any mechanics on that boss, really. It's very, very low on mechanics. It's a DPS check all the way through. But, you know, they are sort of right that maybe we just have the attitude, don't pre-pot when you first start pulling a new boss. But if they want us to have that attitude a bit more often, maybe they ought to make the bosses a bit harder next time. Or not, it wasn't the bosses that was the problem, but stop us killing them in too few pulls, shall we say. But what they have said is that, you know, they expect the consumable cost to come down over the course of the expansion, and if they don't, then they might interfere then and do something a bit more drastic. I mean, the idea of the Blood of Sargeras vendor is a good one, because we all get them no matter what we do. Although gatherers will get sort of extra, you would think. Everyone gets a decent amount just from doing dungeons and world quests and missions you can send off and things like that. So all you have to do is increase the return we get from those from the vendor, and job sorted, really. What they will probably have to manage, this is where it'll be different for different servers, I suppose, because obviously you'll have to judge it yourself. If you're going to go and get some Fjarnskargl for your Blood of Sargeras, you need to make sure that it isn't just cheaper to use the Blood of Sargeras for something you can craft, sell that and buy the Fjarnskargl itself. So in other words, although you can't sell Blood of Sargeras directly because it's Bob, you have to make sure that the effective market price of it is less than the return you would get by using it at the vendor. And of course, how much it's worth varies from server to server. So yeah, you'll have to check that one yourself, really, rather than just assume it's a good deal to use the vendor. Now, World Quest, the final thing they talked about was World Quest. They've said here, and this is something I can actually have a moan at, it says World Quest don't adjust rewards based on your loot specialisation. Now, the key thing about this is, as you've noticed, they don't want the map changing just because you change spec. So you don't want to look at the map and look at the rewards and go, no, they're rubbish rewards. I know, I'll change to my other spec. Oh yeah, that's much better, I'll do it now. They want to just sort of set rewards. And if it's not a reward that's useful to you, like for example, if a world quest gives a storm relic, none of my specs can use storm, so for me it'll just show as gold. That sort of thing is sort of fine. And the advantage of it as well is sometimes you can get a situation like me as a ret, can see a trinket that has intellect on it for my holy spec potentially. That's the only way I get holy trinkets, should I ever decide, which I will at some point surely, to do a bit of healing, because I daren't change my specialisation to holy, even in a heroic dungeon where I don't expect to get an upgrade for my ret spec. I mean, there's a possibility. What if a legendary drops? What if a legendary appears, I'm in holy spec, and rather than one of the generic ones, I end up with a bloody holy legendary when I still want me ret one. There's still a ret one I want. I won't mind so much if I get it, but until I've got all the ret specific ones, or at least the one I want, there is no way in hell I'm ever changing my specialisation to holy and ret. This is actually the second time I've moaned about legendaries, and this video isn't even about legendaries. I did that last week. Sorry, I'll carry on. But yeah, so I fully support the idea that it's not spec specific, the world quest, so you don't change spec to see what extra rewards you get. And as I say, because of a failing in another area, it is beneficial to be able to get like trinkets for another spec or another role that you can play as well. Now, in terms of world quest variety, this is a funny one. This is one where they're criticising themselves and I'm actually going to support them. It says overlapping world quests aren't being handled well right now. The idea is there's so many world quests, a lot of world quests, which they will add to, but they don't want people getting the same ones all the time. Sometimes you sort of see the same ones a few days on the bounce. They don't really want that idea. I would say that it doesn't happen that much. It happens every now and then. And, you know, but I would say on balance, you're not constantly getting the same ones all the time. even if there's one world quest repeated every few days, and there's always like one, there's so many more world quests that are not. I think they're beating themselves up a little bit there. If they want to work on improving that, then they can do. I think what they said is the issue is caused by the fact that, you know, you can have people refresh a world quest, but there might be already a world quest in that area that they haven't done yet, and so it doesn't need refreshing. And it's all that sort of meshing together. Because, of course, the idea of a world quest is that you can, you know, when it appears, you don't have to like do it that day. It's still there the next day. They have a shelf life, variable shelf life, but they have a shelf life, so you don't necessarily have to be on every day. You can just do more the next day or something like that. But it does appear to be causing problems with this overlapping. But I think they're beating themselves up a bit much. I don't think anyone's... I've not really heard any major complaints about this. Sometimes, yeah, we all have world quests that we don't like doing. There's always some you look at it and you think, oh, shit, do I have to do that? The answer, of course, is always no, because even if it's for the emissary cache and there's only 4 for that world quest type, which is sometimes the case, you could still just get your emissary cache the next day or something, couldn't you? I don't like to, but you could, and wait for another one to come up, because twice a day they refresh anyway. So... yeah, you never have to. Of course, if it's worth artifact power, you probably should. But yeah, it's one of those things that I think it's obviously something they're not happy with from a technical. It's a technical problem they'd like to solve. I don't think a lot of people are complaining about it. So I'm going to end on a point of saying, Blizzard, you're being a bit harsh on yourself there. Forget it. We're not bothered. So anyway, that is my roundup of all the things that Watcher went through. Went through quite a lot of things and quite a lot of interesting things ahead of the patch 7.1, which is coming out next reset. I will be doing a video specifically on patch 7.1 and some of the interesting things you'll be able to do there. And in the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share for further content. And until next time, I'll see you later.